My name is Claire Cook, and this is my presentation, Fragmented Unity, a look at Maggie Nelson's Bluets through Caroline Levine's theories on form. Quote, suppose I were to begin by saying I had fallen in love with a color. Suppose I were to speak this as though it were a confession. Suppose I shredded my napkin as we spoke. It began slowly, an appreciation, an affinity. Then, one day, it became more serious. Then, looking into an empty teacup, its bottom stained with thin brown excrement coiled into the shape of a seahorse, it became somehow personal. Unquote. Thus begins Bluets by Maggie Nelson. Nelson earned her Ph.D. in English literature at the City University of New York. She has published at least 9 books of original poetry and prose, including Bluets. Bluets is a book of genre-bending prose poetry organized into numbered vignettes, each exploring several different themes, including examinations of art and literature, philosophy and science, observations of nature, and musings on the human experience. There are 240 vignettes in Bluets, and each look into a particular aspect of human life through what could be thought of as the speaker's metaphorical, blue-tinted glasses. This unique structure makes Bluets a memorable vehicle with which to experience literary scholar Caroline Levine's theories on form. Levine's seminal work, Forms, Whole, Rhythm, Hierarchy, and Network, compares forms in literature with societal structures such as religion, government, and the structure of society as a whole. When viewed through the critical theory lens of Caroline Levine's Whole and Network, Bluets can be thought of as a work that is both a self-contained whole as well as a series of diverse networks that are both fragmented and unified. Levine's work suggests that forms are a crucial component in understanding and giving structure not only to art and literature, but to societal structures and phenomena within the human experience. Her theories can give scholars, students, and casual readers alike the ability to engage more deeply with texts like Nelson's. This includes a more thorough exploration of intricate thematic elements and nonlinear structures, multidimensional narratives, hybrid genres and forms, interweaved themes and motifs, and the intersectionality of diverse voices. A brief introduction to Levine's forms is necessary to understand their relevancy in evaluating contemporary literature. Hierarchy, the first, concerns structured levels of authority within a system or a whole. As its name implies, it deals with power and control. In the context of Bluets, hierarchy can be thought of as the value judgment's presence within Nelson's work. For example, in one of the last vignettes in Bluets, the speaker says, quote, I want you to know, if you ever read this, there was a time when I would have had you by my side than any of these words. I would rather have had you by my side than all the blue in the world. Unquote. In this case, hierarchy makes a statement of value. As much as the speaker loves blue, they would rather have their lost love than all the blue things in the world. The next form, rhythm, can be thought of as a flow within a structure. It allows a work to move dynamically, creating a sense of tempo and continuity. Levine herself says that, quote, rhythmic forms have often seemed natural, arising from the lived time of the human body, unquote. Rhythm could also be a force that, quote, punishes, like the shackles of a metrical or musical form, unquote. Rhythm does a small quantity of both in Bluets, as Nelson's work is akin to a timeline with the structured form of the vignettes. It could be thought of like the days on the calendar or the numbers on a clock, with the numbered structure having their own metered rhythm that creates a bounded whole. The next form, whole, can be defined as, quote, any bounded space or enclosure, any unity or totality. The concept can refer to nation-states as well as poems. Since Aristotle, many theorists of aesthetics have taken any unity or totality to be the basic definition of all form. An aesthetic object has a form, coherent wholeness, like a body, unquote. Again, this idea of body reasserts itself. Just as a body has respiration rhythms and blood flowing from the heart to the rest of the body of Nelson's prose poetry is itself a whole. Levine discusses the idea of whole or the bounded enclosure in forms, using the example of Emily Dickinson, who eschewed the trappings of social life to pursue her interests, namely poetry. Levine writes, quote, Dickinson's strategic embrace of a bounded enclosure allowed her to resist the draining networks of kinship and local society while permitting her to take part in a larger, more sprawling and energizing network, a transnational literary community." Unquote. Like Dickinson, Nelson creates a kind of bounded enclosure for her work, the color blue. For instance, Vignette 6 is about the ocean. Quote, "The half-circle of blinding turquoise ocean is this love's primal scene. That this blue exists makes my life a remarkable one, just to have seen it, to have seen such beautiful things, to find oneself in their midst. Choiceless, I returned there yesterday and stood again upon the mountain." Unquote. The last form, network, can be thought of as, quote, "a set of connections that link discrete elements. The identity of those elements and how they connect can vary vastly, from computers to organic tissue to city planning to friendships." Unquote. Levine also describes them as, quote, "the forms that rupture or defy enclosed totalities and allow us to understand border-crossing circulations and transmissions." Unquote. Thinking of it this way, then, blue both contains and expands within the work. However, while this central theme creates the structure or the bounded enclosure that houses the networks, much like Dickinson's isolation, it is only limiting on its surface. While Levine's idea of whole can be more broadly applied to any bounded space, such as a city or county, in literature aesthetics and the specific case of Bluets, poems become the bounded form, unified by the color blue, networks within a whole. Each vignette can be considered its bounded enclosure within a larger structure, with the color blue creating the connectedness of that whole. Blue is the vehicle through which the speaker presents their musings and thoughts on various themes, including art, philosophy, science, anecdotal experiences, and the like. The reader can look at seemingly quite different passages and see that they are all connected under a vast blue umbrella. Artists like Yves Klein, who uses blue extensively in his work, and Joan Mitchell are featured prominently, with Mitchell's famous painting Les Bluets, also known as The Cornflowers, being a source of inspiration for Nelson's work. Vincent van Gogh also makes an appearance, and Gauss's theory of colors also features heavily in Bluets. Like Bluets, Gauss's work is a philosophical treatise not just on color, but also on the psychology of color and its relation and importance to the human experience. Structurally, it is also like Bluets, containing seemingly unrelated contemplations that include multiple fields of study, including philosophy, science, psychology, and anecdotal evidence. Both are bounded wholes that are made up of networks, and both are connected by a theme of color. Blue is the central nervous system that creates nodes, or network associations, that are connections related to the color blue. This compilation of different themes creates a more fractalized or outwardly growing structure rather than a linear structure that moves in one direction, but it is all deeply connected by the color blue. There is mention of philosophers and great minds discussing color and the origins of color, especially in Vignette 54, quote, "Long before any wave or particle, some, Pythagoras, Euclid, Hipparchus, thought that our eyes emitted some kind or substance that illuminated or felt what we saw. Aristotle pointed out that this hypothesis runs into trouble at night, as objects become invisible despite the eye's purported power." Unquote. The speaker in Bluets is also dealing with a kaleidoscope of emotions and states of being, but the ones that seem the most significant are grief and loss. A constant bitter taste of loss over an unrequited love flavors the work. In some ways, the speaker's obsession with blue distracts and diverts her attention from her own life, the grief and loss she does not want to feel, the book she is trying to write, and the love she is trying to forget. According to Caroline Levine, when viewed through the lens of whole and network, it could be said that, quote, "these two forms help us grasp cultural experience. It is the relation of networks and wholes that allows us to grab culture as an object of study." Unquote. These two forms also create a dynamic tension that occurs with the intersection of the two forms, whole and network. Linking them by the color blue creates a body poetic of connected fragments, and that is where the tension lies. It lies within the fact that these seemingly disjointed pieces or fragments are connected in a way that creates a cohesive whole. This tension via the intersection of forms challenges the reader to come to terms with the myriad diversity of experiences presented within each vignette, and the overarching unity of the color blue. The intellectual challenge presented to the reader is to try to decipher how the different themes fit together through the use of the color blue. In the context of form, tension is created by the delicate dance between the unifying force of the bounded whole and the fractalized and ever-expanding force of network connections. Levine brings this idea to the forefront when she asks in her work, Forms, quote, "So, which is it? Are networks containable or uncontainable by bounded shapes? I want to suggest that a formalist approach is exactly what we need to answer this question, an inattention to specific encounters between bounded wholes and network sprawl." Unquote. The unanswered, fascinating question and the speculation therein create the underlying tension in Nelson's work. Bluets is an engrossing exploration that encompasses a wide breadth and scope of ponderings on personal and universal elements inherent to the human experience. The work is a fragmented whole that carefully weaves together a brilliant tapestry of thoughts, feelings, and emotions, using blue as the unifying force. And when further analyzed through Caroline Levine's theories on form, the themes resonate with one another and become a living, breathing being. These musings and meditations connect through the repetition of motifs and their thematic coherence with one another in a way that encourages readers of all academic levels and skills to plunge into the deep blue of Nelson's mind and heart. It only makes the experience more rewarding when the adventurous reader has Levine's revolutionary ideas on forms to help navigate the blue, blue depths.